And hello, everyone. Hello, hello. And thank you so much for joining me today. Yes, can you believe it? It's already time for another Janome Canada and Sew4Home Facebook Live. I'm so excited to be back with you today. Yes, from my palatial estate with my beautiful Marilyn behind me. I'm reversed. So thank you, everyone, for joining me today. My name is Michael Smith, the National Education Manager of Janome Canada, and I'm thrilled to be back with you for another live Janome Canada Facebook Live with our fabulous Sew4Home Lady of the Hour. Let's bring her on right away because, as always, we have lots to share with you, especially the sneak peeks. A lot of you love those little sneak peeks that we share during our live. So I will bring her on, the fabulous Liz Johnson from Sew4Home.
And the crowds go wild. Yes.
Yes, hello. It is great to be back with you.
Indeed. I always love these. These are so fun to do. And this one is, to me, especially fun, even though I don't have the absolute finished sample to share with you all. In some ways, I think that's really even a little more interesting because we're going to talk a bit about what happens in the background, how on earth we put a project together, kind of everything that goes into it. And I'm going to call out some of the techniques. And so you guys will be primed and ready to go. So when this exclusive project hits Janome Canada,
yes, it will be in the Inspire tab of the Janome Canada website. Again, this is a sneak peek. Again, Sew4Home makes it look so effortless, but there's a lot of effort behind the scene. And even on Janome Canada's part, our fabulous marketing guru, as I call him, Alan, then puts together everything on the website, all the instructions, all the links, all the photos. And then I do a Janome like blog to say, hey, it's here on the website. All of that is in the works, and it will be in the Inspire tab on Janome.CA under the Sew4Home tab. Click on that, and then you'll eventually see all this product. And then, of course, I'll let everybody know when it's ready to go.
Right. Perfect. Well, if you responded to our promo box, which showed you a little sneak peek drawing of our original concept, we have altered that a little bit. And so I have a new sneak peek drawing. So you can see that there are similarities, but there are also differences. And one of the things that I really want to focus on during today's little chat is the fact that behind the scenes, when you get a project and you're ready to do it, there has been weeks and weeks of effort that have gone on that you never even see when you finally get those nice, easy to go through instructions. And it starts out with trying to decide which type of product and project that we're going to work with. And in this case, we took a look at pillows because we hadn't done a pillow for a little while as a Janome Canada exclusive project. And so we started doing what we call our trend spotting. We were looking out there to see what's going on, what kind of keywords and phrases are popular search terms on social media. And one of the things that we kept seeing over and over again, especially in home decor, was the hippie home or boho style. And so that's kind of where we started meandering with our project, our initial project design. And I've even brought a special photo that I'm going to allow Michael to share, and especially since it is Throwback Thursday, that will prove to you that I do have an honest background of being a flower child so that I could help put together this flower power pillow. So Michael, do you want to show them this amazing image of me? Okay, it is throwback, but I'm not necessarily going to tell you how far back it throws it back.
Oh, so there we go. I hope you can all see that beautiful photo. I love it.
Oh my gosh, there I am inside you can't tell as much, but I am inside my Volkswagen Beetle, and that's my dear previous boyfriend who is still one of my best friends, and we are out tooling about during our hippie flower children days.
So, I absolutely love those sunglasses.
I know, right? Oh, look at all that hair. All right,
Yep.
enough of that. So we are back. And so when we started with the original design, which is the one that you all saw in the promo box, we probably put together about 3 or 4 prototypes, and we were tweaking it, we were playing around with it, and it just wasn't working. It just wasn't working. And although we could get parts of it to work out, we also knew that we were doing things that only we might be able to do. And so that somebody who maybe is not as experienced or doesn't have all of the tools, it would be really difficult for them. So we kind of changed up the design slightly. And
Ooh,
as Michael
sweet.
mentioned, it kind of looks like a Dresden plate.
Yes, it looks like a traditional Dresden plate quilt block. It's beautiful.
And so what we have done is we've actually increased the number of petals that this particular flower power pillow is going to have. We've narrowed the pattern. You do get a pattern for each of these so that you can get like a beautiful fussy cut in each of your petals and get that great shape to come right down into the middle. And one of the things, we have a tutorial on this, so if you want to find out more, you certainly can by looking at our mixing and matching tutorial on Sew4Home. If you look at them, and I've actually got some little snippets and swatches here of the different fabrics, there's a lot that comes into play with picking those. So that seemed like we just kind of, threw some things together, but oh, no. You really have to think about what your palette is. So you can tell that there is a fair amount of orange that we brought in, but it's all kind of pulling together with the secondary colors. So maybe orange is our primary color, but there's some different shades of orange. And then the secondary color, which is kind of a pink and another brown, those are being able to be pulled out. So like we have this darker fabric, which, at first look, it's like, wow, that's so dark, that's not going to work. But you have a brown that is happening in this one and a brown that is happening in this really cute little
Oh, I love that
dragonfly
one.
fabric, but it also has some orange in it. And then we also found a real fun little kind of orange and pink here. So we have oranges that are coming in, we have pinks that are coming in, and then we have that kind of tertiary color, the brown that is being picked up here and there in those highlights. And the other thing that you want to take a look at is the size of your motifs. They shouldn't all be the same. I think that's one thing when maybe you're initially trying to put something together, and you may have found this in your quilting, when everything is the same size, it just gets kind of dull. Nothing is important. It all just kind of blends together. So you do want to vary the size of the motif. You can see that we did actually repeat one of our fabrics. And with that, again, is kind of some trial and error. So we started with 8 completely different fabrics, and it was like, no, that's just a little too much. So we went down to 7, and that was just the perfect mix. And the back of this pillow will be just like the front, only we're going to rotate it so that you have a little bit of difference front to back. The other thing we did in our prototype and experimenting is we went from the larger kind of flat applique center to a tufted covered button. And again, this allowed us to kind of have an easier point at which to draw all the petals in. Now, if you can see in between each of the petals, you're going to add some decorative stitching. And that kind of additional texture is really a hallmark of that hippie style, that boho style that is going to bring everything together. And so Michael and I worked this morning on putting together some suggestions for you on how to get that best look. We suggest a slightly heavier thread, like a number 12 weight cotton, this is Arafil, or just a regular Coats heavy thread, something that has just a little more oomph to it so that it pops out along that seam. And this is not a stitch in the ditch. This is actually stitching to either side of the seam, and I'll explain why in just a minute. But Michael, you, I know, pulled out several presser feet and some suggestions for the bobbin, some suggestions for the needle. So why don't you kind of go over those with the folks?
Yes. Oh, let me try to get a big, there we go.
Ooh, there we are.
Oh, wonderful, using all this technology.
We're
So
so
yes,
impressed.
when we're talking decorative stitches, and this is a perfect project to do with all the decorative stitches. So many times I hear from people, oh, my machine has so many stitches. When am I going to use them all? Well, now this is the perfect time to experiment. Do your little, test samples first. There are some of my heirloom decorative stitches. Now, the cool thing too, you can really have a lot of fun with these decorative stitches. For example, down here in the middle is one stitch, and then I put another stitch butted up right against it. And then, in many of our Janome machines, we have the mirroring capabilities. So here on the left, it's the same stitch in black as in pink here. I just mirror imaged it and flipped it over. But by combining them here, that looks like a big, ribbon, as if one big stitch, but it's actually 3 stitches put together. So you can have a lot of fun with your decorative stitches. Make sure you back your fabric with this is just a tearaway stabilizer, but make sure you back your fabric with a stabilizer to help beef it up and support all that extra decorative stitches. Certainly use any stitch you would like. This is my fabulous CM17. I'm in the heirloom category. And again, you can select whatever kind of decorative stitch you wish. And again, on many of our machines, whoops, trying not to hit the camera too much, we have, again, the mirror imaging button, which is down here at the bottom of my screen. Ooh, there we go. That mirror image. So in this case, this stitch is going to look exactly the same. But if I select, there, this little curly Q, that may be very bright on the screen to see. That little curly Q, again, when I hit the mirror image, boom, there, that's all I need to do. Now, the machine will often tell you which presser foot to use. Typically for our decorative stitches, we're using the satin stitch foot. Oh, I'm trying to reduce that glare. The satin stitch foot, we have, the F foot is the traditional one that has a little bar across, and there's a little red triangle that indicates the center needle position. So that's the F foot. It's the plastic satin stitch foot. It has a groove on the underside that allows those extra decorative stitches to pass through. And the sides of the foot you'll see are metal, so that help feeds the fabric very easily. Then we have the F2, the open toe. There is no bar in between, but there is a little tick mark in the foot that is the center needle position as well. So you could use that, the same groove for those decorative stitches, or an optional foot from your fabulous Janome dealer, the border guide foot. Now this one is 9mm that I'm using. It's a snap-on foot for any 9mm machine. It's the FB foot, but it's also available in the 7mm and 5mm. So double check with your Janome dealer. It's the FB foot. And I've demoed this foot actually in the A to Z with Janome series on Janome HQ YouTube. You'll see this FB foot is similar to the border, or similar to the F foot and F2. It's got that groove on the underside, but it's got these wings, as I call them, and they have these red lines on either side. So when you put this on your machine, then you can line up your rows of decorative stitches up against, so I'll just zoom in. Ooh, there. You can line up the decorative stitches, the rows of decorative stitches with those guidelines. So let's say if I wanted to do a line of stitching way over here, I could use this previous row of decorative stitches as my guide. So that way I am not marking my fabric at all. So isn't that cool? You're just stitching along that line. So that way, again, you're not having to mark your fabric. So the border guide foot is an optional foot available from your Janome dealer. And again, it works out perfectly parallel. Another Sew4Home project that we absolutely adored, whoops, this border guide foot. If you go to Sew4Home's website, you will find the sewing machine cover that they had rows and rows of decorative stitches. And that's when we all fell in love with this border guide foot in particular, for those rows and rows of decorative stitches on your sewing machine cover. That's again sew4home.com. Needles, when you're going to be using those thicker threads, as Liz suggested, we definitely want bigger needles with bigger eyes. So these Janome purple tip needles with a size 14 eye, the purple tip in particular, have that flared cobra head around the eye of the needle, so just above the eye of the needle. So it helps separate the fibers of the fabric so you can get the needle thread and the bobbin thread to intersect more readily. These are the perfect if you have skip stitches. These purple tip needle will eliminate those skip stitches. Or you could always try a Janome red tip, size 14. Again, it's got that larger eye. They're both very sturdy needles. They'll go through those extra layers. They'll handle that extra thread, no problem, that thicker thread. Speaking of thicker thread, this is some embroidery floss, for example, or again, it could be the 12 weight, as Liz suggested, a very thick thread. When we're going to use thicker thread in our needle, we're not going to use this in the bobbin, we're just going to use it in the needle. We do not want to use the automatic needle threader. Now here on my CM17, I have an automatic needle threader, or again, maybe your machine, they've got the needle threader at the side. We don't want to use the needle threaders with thread that is over 30 weight. And thread is very weird. The higher the number, the thinner the thread, the lower the number, the thicker the thread. So a 12 weight is thicker than a 30, for example. So if it's a thicker thread, we want to use these manual needle threaders. These are available in a blister pack from your Janome dealer. And if you see, there's my strand of thread, and there's this little wire in the needle threader that comes out, and you run this along the shaft of the needle, and that little wire will come out and poke the thread through the eye of the needle. So you can thread the needle manually this way with your thicker thread. Do not try your needle threader built in. That little wire will more than likely bend, because that thicker, the wire that's in your needle threader will probably bend, because again, that's a really thick thread to go through. So use this manual needle threader instead from your Janome dealer. And then lastly, because we're going to use a thicker thread in the needle, let's use a thinner thread in the bobbin so they can work together more easily. I always love using this Janome bobbin thread available from your Janome dealer. Typically, this is for our embroidery machines, but I also like using it with decorative stitches. So use the Janome bobbin thread. There are another of other brands of thread that are, again, finer, lighter weight, like a 60 weight or an 80 weight is quite thin, and that will help counteract the thickness of that needle thread. So then you'll do your beautiful rows of decorative stitches. So there.
So many tips. I love that. And, you know, looking at the border guide foot, and oh, great, I just dropped my needle. Hold on.
Yes, I'll say that border guide foot is absolutely wonderful. And again, full instructions on the back of the blister pack. And as a little tip, I once had a lady suggest to me, oh, she saves the blister pack, the cardboard, she puts it in a page protector in a binder, and she always has it. She'll throw away the plastic, but the written instructions in the back, save it just in case. Or again, you can go back to the Janome HQ YouTube channel, as I've demoed a lot of these Janome presser feet. So there we are.
I dove out of sight there, but I dropped my needle. So what I was going to say is, you'll notice here that we actually have done a little spiral stitch on our button cover. But I was thinking that using that border guide foot and whatever stitches you decide to use between the petals, that would be so cute. So you could just get your little swatch of fabric, stitch out however many rows of decorative stitches that you want, and then cut your circle for your covered button from that. So that is in the center, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with making covered buttons. You can make them by hand, but it's really kind of time consuming, and these button kits are really excellent. So you can simply cut out, I didn't cut a perfect circle, but you can cut out your circle and you'll put it into your little well, and then goes in the top of the button. You tuck it all in, put on the back, and then smash the two together, and you're going to end up with a beautiful covered button. And like we said, we used what we could find as the biggest, which is actually 2.5 inches. So that's a nice big button. And it is doing double duty. Not only is it kind of tufting the button together at the center, it also is hiding the opening that you're going to be using for stuffing all the petals. So you'll put together your all your petals front and back, add your decorative stitching on each layer, then stitch those together, and then you will end up with a nice opening in the center, and you can use that for the stuffing. And we use like, I've noticed sometimes now that even the bags of fillers come with like a little wooden chopstick, which I think is funny because we've done that, you know, for years, listed that, you know, use a chopstick or a long knitting needle or whatever to kind of fill in as you're stuffing with little bits. And that's something with any kind of shaped pillow like this, don't try and kind of shove it all in there like you're stuffing the Thanksgiving turkey. Just take little handfuls, fluff them up a little bit, and stuff that in. And that will give you just a much more fluffy, and you're not going to get any clumps and all of that. So that's a great thing there. And then once you've got that all stuffed, you're going to use what is a doll making or stuffed animal tip, and it includes using some pearl cotton floss, just like a nice strand of pearl cotton floss, and it should match whatever the heavy thread is that you're using for your decorative stitching. And you're going to thread that onto a doll needle. This is the one that I just dropped on the floor, but just a long, sharp needle with a large eye. And you're going to basically cinch up these little petals. So the pattern itself is going to form a nice scalloped edge, but not what you might normally think of as more of a petal definition. But that's one of the things that we figured out as we went prototype after prototype after prototype, is that rather than relying just on the pattern to do this, using this technique where you're going to, before you put the button on, you're going to wrap your thread around each of the petals. So you're basically going through the middle, bringing it out around and back down through the middle and cinching it up a little bit. And that's going to just kind of cinch in that outside edge a little bit more. And as that's happening, it's sinking in to the seam along each of the petals. So it's nice and tight. Nope, you're not going to end up with some weird loopy thread there. And that's, as I mentioned, the decorative stitching is going along either side of that seam. But as you cinch it down, those stitches are coming together so that then they form what looks like a stitch in the ditch. So it's kind of the best of all worlds. Like we were saying, trying to do these with petal shapes, trying to make pockets out of them, you would be amazed at the different steps that we went through to figure out what would be the easiest for you. And this technique, which then you can use in other situations where you want to kind of cinch something up like that, it's a great little technique that you can use for that. And when you're deciding what you want to do with your decorative button cover, do put just like a little bit of either just a regular plain batting or even a tiny circle of fusible fleece. Put that behind your fabric before you add the stitching. And again, that just gives it a little bit more of a poof. You can still, you know, as long as you keep it just the size of the top dome of the button cover, don't go way out to the edge, just keep it in the center, then you still just have just that single layer of cotton that you can use to tuck and add the back of the button cover. And as Michael mentioned, using a stabilizer behind the cotton when you're cutting your petals, that really is another great tip that we use on pretty much any of our shaped pillows, or anytime we add a lot of decorative stitching to pillows. We like the woven lightweight interfacing. This is the Pellon Shape Flex, but there's other options out there. But it's just a nice way to kind of smooth everything out. You're going to cut it along the seam line, so it's not going to get into your seam allowance and, you know, add any additional bulk, but it smooths things out. And so that, again, you don't get any little fibers that are trying to work their way through onto the outside of your pillow. It makes things nice and smooth. And just one final thing on the construction, we have indicated a 1/2 inch seam allowance for everything. A little bit unusual sometimes, again, with these shape type of things, or the fact that we're piecing things together, like almost like the Dresden plate. You might normally go for a 1/4 inch seam. But in this case, you have a lot of pulling and pushing and stretching that's going on as you're adding the filler to the pillow. And then as you're wrapping around that pearl cotton and cinching it down. So we felt it was really better to have just that little bit wider 1/2 inch seam allowance. And also then when you flatten that seam allowance behind the middle stitches that are happening here, these seams here along the curved edge, you are going to want to generally clip your seam like you would normally for any kind of a curve. But here we recommend just pressing it open and flat. And what that also gives you is another layer of stabilization behind the decorative stitching that you're going to add. So it's going to be smooth, it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be a free exclusive project on Janome Canada. So much fun.
Yes, which is fantastic. And again, this was just a sneak peek. So full instructions will be, if it sounds, oh my gosh, I'm never going to remember all this. Well, good, you're not supposed to. This is just a little heads up. Now, the cool thing, though, when this project does get on to be Janome Canada's website, you can always go back and review this presentation that Liz and I are doing now for a little bit of little tips and tricks, you know, that if, you know, it didn't make it into the instructions that Liz and I are sharing right now. But I did want to point out about, the 1/2 inch that you mentioned, Liz. I just wanted to point out, you know, on almost all of our Janome needle plates, there is right there that 1/2 inch guide etched in the needle plate. And if I come down, there's a little tick mark on the bobbin cover. There's a little tick mark on the bobbin cover. So when we're guiding our foot or our fabric, you know, yes, we can always use a presser foot, a wider presser foot, but there it lines up with the marks on our needle plate. Or does your machine have a cloth guide? This is the fabulous cloth guide for the CM17 and Continental range of machines. There is a 1/2 inch tick mark. Ooh, if you can see there, 1/2 inch tick mark. And again, we line up this fence with that 1/2 inch tick mark. And then in this case, I would line it up with that little red mark of my cloth guide and lock it into place. And this way, again, there's that nice deep fence. Then when put in our machine, then we line up our fabric up against it, and it'll be 1/2 inch from our needle. So do you have maybe a cloth guide with your Janome machine to give you that 1/2 inch accuracy?
I love that. I love that guardrail.
Oh yeah, me too. I need a guide, that's for sure. I generally sew quite fast, so I need all the help I can get, and Janome's with us every step of the way.
Indeed.
So, yeah.
So this will be, as mentioned, all the steps, all the photos. You can rest assured that we've gone through all the pain and suffering of making sure that it's going to be as easy as possible for you to put together on the end. As I mentioned, there is a pattern that you'll be able to download as well for those petal shapes. And if you are new to fussy cutting or playing around with things like that, download 2 copies of it. And then on one of them, cut out the center along the seam line so that you have like a little window. And that makes a beautiful guide for you to kind of move around on your fabric until you come to an area and it's like, oh, that's perfect. That is right where I want it. And so you can then sketch around there, put the full pattern piece in place, and then cut out your petal shape. So that
what a great idea. Yes.
You know, and it's nice because, of course, you know, we're allowing you to just download on your home printer. It's hard to print any kind of semi-transparent stuff, you know, paper or anything like that, just in a home printer. So rather than something that you would have that would be see-through, like a tissue paper on a normal pattern, that allows you just a great way to kind of move it around until you have just that perfect spot. And it really
oh my gosh, fantastic. That would be absolutely wonderful. Yes. Yeah. There's always, again, so many wonderful tips from Sew4Home. That's why we love working with you.
Aww.
So everyone, as usual, I'm keeping my eye on the clock because I know everybody's got a busy day, as do we. But yes, thank you so much, Liz, for joining us. And thank you, everyone, so much for joining us and all of your support in our Janome Canada and Sew4Home Facebook Lives. And again, we will give you all the heads up when the project is on the Janome.CA website. There'll be a Janome Life blog letting everybody know it's there. They can go in, download it for free, and share all the Janome and Sew4Home love.
That's right.
So thank you, Liz, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, and have a fabulous day.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.